to order for the Historic Preservation Commission of August 9th, 2023. Welcome, everybody. Hope everybody's trying to stay cool this summer. Okay, let's go ahead and do a roll call, I guess. And I guess probably I should be doing this now. Is that what I understood?
We could just do a show of,
course
show of hands. too.
Yeah, I guess why don't we just, let's see, we have Commissioner Ingalls, Commissioner Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Larson.
Here.
Vice Chair. Commissioner Montero.
Here.
Commissioner Karuki.
Here.
And we have online Commissioner Williams. Hello, Raylyn, thank you. All right, I think that's everyone. And that does give us a quorum for today, so thank you, everyone. And moving on to item 1, call to audience. Anyone that wishes to address the commission can do so. And if anyone in the audience today needs to address us, you need to come up and fill out a card. And I'm guessing at this point, did we get anyone on any virtual submissions today? No?
No.
All right, very good. Okay, moving on to agenda item 2, approval of July 12th meeting minutes. And commissioners, you have got a copy of the minutes in your packet for today, so I'll take any comments or edits if anybody has those.
Chairman, I have one edit.
Yes.
On page 6, second full paragraph, last sentence, I believe that should be Vice Chair Fackler stated that he likes a solution because it does not harm the historic structure. Need to add the word not.
Okay, that's page 6, you said?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I believe that I see Commissioner Williams has her hand up. Commissioner Williams. Commissioner Williams, can you proceed? Do you have a comment?
Can you hear me?
Just barely. We can't hear you at the moment.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry about that. I do have a comment on page 2, the first paragraph. I think it's the 8th line. The Harry Walker House is listed in the National Register of Historic Place. I think places with the S at the end. I think that's accurate. And then on the same page, 3rd paragraph, the 9th line that starts with that, and I don't know what the next word, it says that jibs. I don't know what jibs is. I think that may be a miss.
It's supposed to be jibes. Does it have an E on
Jibes.
it? Is it Jibes? Did I forget the E? Or does it have?
I
Okay, so it's jibes. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
believe that's the way I would spell it anyway. I'm not sure that, yeah. You can spell with a Y, spell it with an I.
Well, if it's correct, it just kind of, I just don't remember hearing the word, I guess. But if it's okay, then you can strike that.
Okay, thank you.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Nothing further? Okay, thank you. Any other comments or edits? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote on approving the minutes. And if I can just maybe get everyone just to say aye if you approve, all who say aye.
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 I,
Thank you. Any nays? All right, motion passes and minutes are approved. All right, moving on, agenda item 3, approval of agenda. Unless anyone has any changes to make or modifications, anyone? Hearing none, I'll go ahead and motion to approve the agenda for tonight. Very well. All right, moving on then, getting through this fast. Agenda item 4, we have update on plans for the historic rehabilitation of the Hayden Flour Mill and silos. Presenters of our representatives of Venue Projects and Sunbelt Holdings, and Maria Loeffner, City of Tempe Deputy Director of Economic Development. Welcome back.
Hello, very happy to be back. Thank you very much. Lorenzo Perez from Venue is en route, and Heidi Kimball is online. So we can toss questions to them as well. I just wanted you to know that they are also participating today. So we are very excited to be in front of you again. This time in front of you is to tell you that we are ready to go to council with a development agreement. We're ideally next month. We're still finalizing some language, with the lawyers, of course. But I'm happy to say, actually, can you put up the slide? I'm sorry. I'm happy to say that we're still on track with with the proposal as it was presented first to this body about 2 years ago. We've had various updates to you about our progress. So that progress is still being made. The most exciting part, I think, that is occurring is our collaboration with SRPMIC. I included in your packet the spirit of communication that we developed with them. And Peter Busick might be on as well. He's also been instrumental in the definition of what that trailhead could be. So we have affirmed, and it will be in the development agreement as well, that phase 1, that in addition to the site cleanup, we will be looking to establish the public park and begin the rehabilitation of the trailhead. Other exciting news related to the trailhead is through the city's partnership with Rio Reimagined, we were able to get in front of the Conservation Fund, who is interested in providing a sponsorship for the rehabilitation of the trailhead. So we think that's very exciting as well. And we don't have anything finalized yet. They are waiting for the development agreement as well, but we've had numerous meetings with the Conservation Fund about that. In fact, I'll be introducing Shane Anton from SRPMIC to the Conservation Fund on Friday. We have a meeting to talk about what this could look like to make sure that everyone's on the same page. So that is the most exciting new news that we have. Additionally, we have made further progress on the environmental studies. A phase 2 scope of work is currently being put together for us. And actually, Zach Lechner has taken the lead on both the environmental and the archaeological. So if you have questions about that, I would toss it to him since he's been the one most intricately involved in dealing with what the scope could look like. And we're working with, who is it again? SCS or no? SCS. I don't remember what that stands for, but they're the ones who will be doing the environmental study, the phase 2. They did the phase 1 as well.
That's correct.
That's correct. Okay. Heidi, would you like to talk about progress that's been made on the developer side or the developer perspective before we get into questions from the commission? Does she have access to? Oh, okay.
Sorry,
good.
I'm not there in person. I did something to my knee and I'm hobbling around today, so
Oh.
I'm at home. Yeah, I think we're making great progress. We have decided as a result of our discussion with not only Peter Busick, but the the tribes and the city and the Parks Department to kind of change up the order in which we propose to redevelop the site and focus first on the trailhead connection and a potential pavilion to sort of highlight that trailhead experience. So I think that's very exciting. We are incorporating a lot of the elements that were identified in Peter's design, along with some art concepts that I think we will be inspired by the tribes. So we're very excited about that particular aspect of it. And I think we're also working on, and I'm going to let Lorenzo speak to this when he gets there, but we have retained the services of a consultant who's helping us with the submittal for the tax credits and the historic tax. Sorry, I'm not using the right words to describe it, but we know that's a long submission process and we want to get in line in queue. And so he's identified the steps we need to take to get there. And Lorenzo will talk more about that when he's here, because that's his former employee that's actually going to be doing the work. And he may be there tonight. I'm not sure if he is or not, but any questions?
Go ahead.
Commissioner?
Great to have you both here. Maria and Heidi, thank you so much for coming by. We're quite excited about what's coming here. I don't know if this is a question to wait for Lorenzo, but I would love to hear a little bit more about the thoughts on the timing and sequencing. It sounds like you may be wanting to start on the trail to open that to the public sooner. Would love to hear about the kind of sequence of openings, because I like the idea of saying, let's rejuvenate that and bring that to the public earlier.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. And I wanted to mention before I answer your question, I neglected to say that what's on your screen, this is what we presented in March. So you see there hasn't been any changes yet, but I know that Sunbelt and Venue are working with Logan Simpson, I believe. Is that correct, Heidi?
Yes, yes, that's correct.
On the trailhead, so we'll be back with the trailhead design once that is established. We don't have any new design yet, of course, because we don't have the development agreement. So, but this is we're staying with what was proposed, and it's been it seems to be well received by the council as well. To answer your question, so I do believe, yay, Lorenzo's here. He could probably answer it better because he'll be doing the actual work. But the first step is going to be the cleanup of the site. And so phase one will be composed primarily of the cleanup of the site. And at the same time, we'll be doing the designation of the public park through our city process. And then once the design is done for the trailhead, we will begin the work. Well, they will begin the work of on the trailhead. And we're doing it that way because we know the historic preservation will take a longer time. So we think that's going to activate the site, at least in the eyes of the community. They'll be able to see that something's happening there. We will be able to do the trailhead, which is of extreme importance. And while that's going on, we can work on the historic preservation piece. And here comes Lorenzo to tell me if I got that right. Lorenzo, they're asking about the timeline,
Yes.
the sequencing.
So we just started doing that. Sorry, first of all, thank you for your patience.
Yes, welcome
And I
back,
was lucky to get a
Lorenzo.
spot right out front. So we've hired a project manager that's going to help oversee specifically the historic preservation. He's here this evening, Lucas Lindsay, a former employee of ours. He actually was very pivotal in writing our RFP, and he's doing this as a side gig for us while he's studying his PhD at ASU in urban planning. So Lucas also sits on the Architectural Review Committee at SHPO. So he's helped outline a path forward for us. And we've set 2 timeline goals, ambitious goals to get in front of Architectural Review Committee in March. All the planets need to align for that to happen. If we don't make that timeline, it'll be July of 24. So there's a sequence of events that need to take place. We're currently reaching out to historic preservation consultants that'll be tasked with writing the nomination, as well as working directly with SHPO and National Park Service, along with Lucas and myself. And so we're going to go through an RFQ. We've got 4 individuals we've identified. We're going to do an interview process, hope to have them selected by mid-September. and get rolling on this as soon as possible. So, it's going to be a long time, but at least we have a timeline and a path forward and someone to manage it, and hopefully someone soon to actually write the nomination. So we're fortunate in the sense that so much academic historical work's already been done, so that should really help streamline the process. So, yep.
And I was mentioning on the phase one about the cleanup and the trailhead and everything. I don't know if you had more to talk about on that.
No, I think the most important thing now is getting the phase two going. There's a lot of environmental stuff we need to evaluate, the environmental as well as the archaeological. I think we're looking into what that's going to entail. And with all this upfront information, these are the biggest variables in our schedule: historic preservation, environmental, and the archaeological. So once we have a better sense of that, we'll be able to actually put out probably a little more definitive timeline. So, yeah.
Are there any questions?
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for the update. And I'll open up the floor to commissioners. Any further questions? Vice Chair?
The phase two that you'll be doing on archaeology, phase one obviously will tell you where things might be.
Mm-hmm.
Phase two will be to verify that. How much of a disturbance will that be to the site?
I just got to review. We've been working closely with the scope of work, and I think that's where we're at. We're trying to clarify that. From my review of it, it's primarily concentrated on the north side of the mill in the event lawn area, some areas in between the mill and silos, and I think there's a few little things peppered on what we call the desert terrace, or between the silos and the butte, where I think there was an old structure that needed to be evaluated. But so I know there's going to entail some borings. I think there was like 12 or 13 borings to do soil sampling. I guess there was some indications from past environmentals that there might be some metals and stuff from the old wash tower that was over there. And the rest of it is going to be lead and asbestos paint update. And we just also located a previous report that we're looking through. And so we've handed all that to the new engineering firm, which they say should help speed the process and really hone them in. And I believe, is it 6 to 8 months? It's a pretty involved process just because of the size of the site. And we've asked them to really try to find access points into the silos, into the conveyor room at the top of the silos, the head house, and the below grade conveyor rooms, because we need to get in there. We need to understand also if we can have access into the actual silos themselves, because no one seems to know if they're actually empty or not. So so we got to do a pretty thorough review. The silos are the biggest question. The mill, people have been in and out of, and there's pretty good access pretty much everywhere. There's a few below grade old conveyor pits that we need to access, but we see the access points. So I think it's just working through all that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions, commissioners? Yes, proceed.
Just one more. Great to have you here, Lorenzo.
Yeah, I guess the others.
Could you speak to the note in the agreement on design subordination, scale, massing, detail, and just how you're thinking about how the buildings will integrate with the silo?
How do they integrate with it? Well, right now,
Architecturally speaking.
oh, architecturally speaking, we don't quite know yet, really. I think we're sort of we've intentionally been pumping the brakes on design to really understand kind of what we're dealing with and stuff. And also, I think the historic preservation piece is going to dictate some of that as well. When we walked with the National Park Service reviewer, she was sort of curious about what direction we were going. She seemed to like she had asked me why this sort of site development pattern, and we said we're sort of emulating how it's always been. There's always been buildings peppered around the mills in a subordinate and secondary or supportive role. She liked that. I said, in our case, we're trying to concentrate along circulation and define views and frame outdoor spaces. She also asked, have you given any thought to architectural buildings? And we said, we really haven't. We've really sort of thought about keeping it simple. We want them to be elegant and understated, but we really want them to enhance the mill and the silos. We keep saying they're the stars of the campus. What we do know about them is that they need to be durable and adaptable, because we're designing this project with the idea that it's going to be a legacy project. It's going to pass decades, hopefully century plus. So they need to be durable, they need to be adaptable. And so that'll be a key driving force there. But so, and then, we're going to get into material palette and all that. We're actually starting to think about our team and start having getting our design and engineering team and civil engineering and all that. So we're kind of intentionally making sure we hold off on the architecture and design, because we know that could easily just shoot to the front and be the distraction. We're trying to really understand how the thing gets built, how it gets passed on to future generations, how it actually operates, what's going in there, and then let the architecture respond to that. So that's the approach we're taking.
No, I appreciate that approach, and I'm looking forward to seeing the mill and silos shine brightly.
Yep,
So that's all I have, Chair Woodson.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, Lorenzo, Maria, thank you again for coming back. And just again, with the development agreement, you're saying is going to go to council fairly soon?
Yes, we're shooting for September, but it is an ordinance, so it requires 2 council hearings. So ideally, September 7th and the 28th. However, it depends on the attorneys if they're done fighting over language.
Okay, sure. Yeah, understood. And then thereafter would begin the phase 1 of what you were sort of summarizing.
Yes, so the phase 2 of the environmental, and then the phase 1 of the project, which is the cleanup, the trailhead, the urban park designation.
Very good. Okay. And then I guess with respect to the commission's further involvement, I guess could you be coming back to us to give us updates periodically on the status of, like the National Register nomination and things like that? And
Absolutely.
Is there anything else that?
How we envision working is how we have been working. I work very closely with Zach internally, and then he'll say, I think it's time for an update, for example. So we say, yes, that's great. Let's get on the calendar.
And the
Excellent.
commission will have a chance to review the National Register nomination, because since it's within the confines of the certified local government that we have here in Tempe, the State Historic Preservation Office will pass it all along to us, and we'll have a hearing item on it just prior to the state review of the nomination.
Okay. And that's a National Register nomination. It's on the Tempe
Correct.
Register,
It's
right?
locally
Okay.
designated. That's right.
Okay, very good. Excellent. No, this is, I mean, I believe I speak on behalf of the commissioners. We're really pleased with how this is moving forward and the due diligence that you're giving to involving lots of voices, including tribal communities, and really giving this a thorough consideration. So we appreciate that effort, and we wish you luck.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Agenda item 5, update on historic preservation related efforts at the Gonzalez Martinez House, located at the corner of First Street and Farmer. Presenter is Dr. Lechner.
Thanks,
Thank
Chair.
you.
Appreciate it. So we have environmental assessments going on this site as well. So environmental site assessment, phase 1 and phase 2 is being conducted by a different company than SES. It's being conducted by Engineering and Environmental Consultants, which is kind of equally talented in this area. As part of the materials for this meeting and this particular agenda item, I included the phase 1 report for the environmental site assessment, and that was completed back on June 30th. That the actual assessment. As a result of the findings there, it was decided to move forward with phase 2 of the ESA, or environmental site assessment. And the goal there is to test for recognized environmental conditions, RECs for short. And that's primarily due to the fact that the site was previously used as a junkyard. And also it has a septic tank on the site as well. So I don't see there being like, any major environmental concerns, but it's just kind of simple kind of due diligence that's happening here. As part of the phase 2 environmental, we currently have our scope to do some archaeological work. However, we're kind of checking with the developer now because I think independently they were in the process of arranging for some archaeological surveying, kind of like class 1 type surveying on the site. And so we're just going to make sure there's no kind of duplication of efforts there. So phase 1 is done. Phase 2 is the scope has been completed, although that may be revised slightly based on what I just said. Another item here, asbestos remediation. So there was, based on a test that was done a couple of months ago on the house, the interior and the exterior of the house, there was a small amount of asbestos. I was actually a little bit surprised there wasn't more, so I was very, very glad. It's a small amount of asbestos in tile on the bathroom floor of the Gonzalez Martinez house. So it's a very small issue. Cary Environmental Services came out on July 24th to remediate, and there were, went smoothly. There were no issues with that. We did receive third item. We did receive a updated building condition assessment by Bob Graham of Motley Design Group. And I did include that in the updated version of the packet that you received. Just a few points. So this was not a comprehensive reassessment. So for many of you who remember viewing during, as part of kind of previous agenda items related to Gonzalez Martinez house, the 2017 building condition assessment report, that was a very detailed report. It's like 125 pages, something like that. This really was just kind of, filling in the gaps, like what are some points of concern, since that report was issued, now that 6 years have gone by. And so the main takeaways from that report, and this isn't, surprising to anyone who's walked by that house, viewing it from First Street, for example. So the east adobe wall has deteriorated more, particularly at the base. There's some cracks that have shown up. So when that stabilization process occurs, like that's something that obviously will be paid careful attention to, to work on, shoring up that wall. And there's surely going to be a lot of replacement adobe bricks that are going to have to be inserted in that wall. One interesting finding was that room 3, which the 2017 building condition assessment report had previously hypothesized was part of a 1918 addition with essentially a foundation, not even a foundation, but just a wall made of railroad ties. It's not actually made of railroad ties. It's not part of that addition. It's actually made of adobe as well. And I asked Mr. Graham, do you assume that this is part of the original, 1880 adobe house, or is this a later addition? And he seemed pretty confident that this was not part of the original home, but it was part of a later addition. I don't know exactly when, but we might be able to pin that down more as work is done. And then room 4, which is composed of railroad ties, is actually only partially composed of railroad ties. So they only go up about 4 feet, and above that, as Mr. Graham mentions, it appears to have been screened and then later filled with beadboard. So happened to have a conversation with Mr. Graham today, along with a couple of my colleagues in Community Development Department Planning Division, and had a very good conversation about kind of what are the next steps in the process. And Mr. Graham agreed kind of fully in line with what I've been suggesting to you over the last few months, several months really. That now that we've got this update, this building condition update, we want to, the first step would be to remove those non-historic additions. from the building to unzip, as Mr. Graham put it, and remove the late residential addition. And the term unzipping there is designed to convey the fact that we are, that we would need to be very careful, of course, or the contractor in consultation with Mr. Graham will have to be and will be very careful, in just removing that item and not, doing damage to historic elements. And then there'd be, a boarding up of openings, and then the adobe itself would be weather protected as well. Not just the locations where the partial demolition occurs, but then also other areas like on the east side and on the west side where there's exposed adobe. And then from there, after that kind of selective demolition, the next step would be to work on soliciting contractors and then kind of coming up with a specific rehabilitation and adobe stabilization plan that we could then move forward with. So I was very encouraged by that conversation. Robert Graham is very skilled in this area. I mean, in terms of cultural resource professionals, I don't know that anyone knows more about the Gonzalez Martinez house than he does. He consulted on the Hayden House restoration or rehabilitation. So this is, this is a very good person to be working with here. So I feel confident with him kind of at the lead of this. I think that's about it that I wanted to provide you with an update on in regard to the house and the rehabilitation of the house. But it's like anything else. We always like to move forward faster, but we are moving forward most definitely. And I've been encouraged by all this activity that's been happening over the last several weeks. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lechner. Commissioners, any questions for the presenter? Yes, go ahead.
First of all, why does it say City of Phoenix on the cover page?
That's a good question. I think you're talking about the environmental survey. Yeah, it's just the way that particular grant works is it's a. In fact, one of your colleagues on the commission had this same question, but I don't know if I can give you a definitive answer. But basically, the communities in the valley it kind of fall under like the same kind of area. Anytime I think if Tempe were applying for this Brownsfield grant, which we're using for the survey, or Mesa, I think Phoenix, their office takes the lead in helping to facilitate it. So it's just a collaborative project with Phoenix and City of Tempe. So we're just working with Phoenix to facilitate it. But they're more it's facilitator, and we're essentially kind of making decisions on what needs to be done, supplying information. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I have another question. Is it okay to ask for update on the development deal?
For the development agreement?
Right, sales of property or?
Yeah.
Update.
All right. So development agreement was finalized on I want to say a week ago Monday. There were and it really focused on kind of historic elements. So I had the opportunity to review it closely a number of times. I went through each of the edits and made suggestions. All of my suggestions were included. And so, we've got a good plan there. Facade conservation easement is required on the property. That's the big one. And so, a number of other points. I haven't seen the kind of the final version, because it's a very long document and doesn't just pertain to historic preservation. But I thought it was in very good shape and with that document.
I guess I have follow-up questions. So is this historic easement guarantees this property to be preserved, like once like a hand changed to developer, like
Right.
I would little bit concerned they may, I don't know, they may demolish at
Right.
that point.
So typically in the past, you know, like because there's facade conservation easements on various properties. Hayden House, you know, has one. Valley Art Theater has one. There's a handful of other. I think Farmer Goodwin has one. And so yeah, the requirement is that kind of any type of work on the building has to maintain the appearance of the building from the time in which it's agreed upon. So in this case, it would be kind of the post rehabilitation appearance of the home, and that's kind of a standard requirement. So yeah, I mean that's a legally binding, you know, that's a legally binding agreement, right? So yeah, certainly anybody could, you know, back over a building or something, but they would be that would they'd be in a world of hurt. I'll put it that way. They would not want to do that. And also, I'll just mention, you know, every conversation I've had with the developer, you know, they're excited and enthusiastic about the house and about you know, assisting in this rehabilitation process, and they know how important it is, not just to the commission, but they know how important it is to the city, you know, to keep and preserve this structure, you know, moving forward, because it is old and it's rare, and you know, it represents a kind of a key part of the history of the city that is, you know, kind of, we don't have a lot of left in the built landscape.
So how many years does this conservation easement valid, like in perpetuity?
I mean, I have not seen the details on this specific one. I can't tell you that for sure. I know that other conservation easements that the city has agreed upon
Mirror Avenue only for 5 years.
do go. No, it's not. Yeah, no. Others that I've seen do go in perpetuity. But again, I can't say that for sure, because again, I haven't looked at the, you know, the final report, or the final version of the
Sorry,
DA.
I don't mean to keep hogging your conversation.
No. I mean,
so
I'm happy to answer your questions.
I'm just curious, was that ever like city remains the ownership and lease the property to the developer? Was that considered?
No, the developer would take over ownership of the Gonzalez Martinez house, and so that's the reason that the facade conservation easement was so, you know, important. You know, was to ensure that the home would be preserved in the future, and also the developers agreed to designate the home in the Tempe Historic Property Register, which is not, as I think we all know, it's not locally designated as historic eligible. But it was never locally designated, and they've committed to ensuring that it will be, which of course, you know, comes with its own, you know, requirements that, you know, any substantial changes would have to the building, which again would not be allowed under the facade conservation easement anyway. But even so, you know, those are supposed to and have to come before the commission if there's any type of permit associated with the work. So there's kind of, you know, there's kind of double protections in some ways on the house, if you want to think about it, or will be. Yeah.
Thank you for the questions. Those were a couple of the ones I had as well. So any other questions, comments?
Yes, Chairs, Commissioner Larson.
Commissioner Larson.
Thank you for the update. Did I hear you say that the adobe on the east side is deteriorating near the ground level? Did I hear that right?
Yes.
I'm thinking about photographs in the package, and I was looking for something like that. Is this where there's like a clean out and an ABS pipe? Is that on the east side?
I'm not sure, and I'm sorry. I had this I had these photographs prepared for you as I was giving you the presentation. I totally forgot about them, but
Oh, it's
but
fine.
this is actually the eastern wall here. So you can see there at the bottom where you can see kind of to the left there, you've got kind of a more intact brick, adobe brick, and then you see just to the right of it, it's severely degraded, and then underneath that is also adobe brick that's just kind of crumbling into well, dust, almost. So that's kind of the area of gravest concern
Yeah.
when it comes to the stabilization. Yeah.
Yeah. And then what's the floor like inside the historic walls? Is it a concrete floor, a dirt floor?
Yeah, there's a variety of floors. There's some concrete flooring. I think I'd have to go back and look at the original building condition assessment report. I can't remember all the different like flooring types, but there's probably like at least two, maybe three different types. There might be some wood flooring. I'd have to check, but yeah, there is a variety of flooring. I think from the building condition assessment report, the concrete flooring was Mr. Graham at the time in 2017 was proposing to take that out, but as part of the rehabilitation, that flooring would be would go back to its kind of original material.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Larson. Any other questions, comments? Vice Chair.
Couple of three questions that Jack, as I get, these probably predate you. The city's property, as it was originally platted, included the railroad right away. And the original documents that were put together showed a 33-foot wide easement to the railroad. I remember when it was 2002 or something. The railroad quit claim the remainder of the city's property just to ensure that they didn't have a claim on the house and the rest of the property. It's my understanding, and I didn't see the documentation, that the railroad now owns the east 35 feet of the property, which is 2 more feet than that original easement was. Have you seen those documents?
I don't think so, but no, I don't believe so.
What my basis of my current concern is in the revised documents that you sent out, unfortunately, we don't have them before us on the screen, the potholes that were done for environmental purposes seem to be, a number of those testing sites seem to be right along that border. And I'm a little bit concerned about the possibility of a railroad property being tested and showing up positive, as railroad property typically does. That's why I'm really concerned about who owns what in that location.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the developer had actually had a concern about that as well, and it's a legitimate concern. And so they had a survey was that area, the parcel was kind of resurveyed, and that's what I included kind of in the revised version, because that is the boundaries of the Gonzalez Martinez house parcel, or the Sussex parcel that's sometimes referred to, that the city is basically using, or did use, had that in mind as the development agreement was being negotiated. So regardless, there was originally, I think, a plan to potentially do some boring in that railroad right of way, but based on that kind of revised Alta, that map, I provided that to the environmental consultant, and based on that, they decided to move out of that railroad right of way and to just bore close, but just bore on what we're confirmed is city owned at this point, still city owned property. So there shouldn't be any issue with any kind of findings associated with land that is actually owned by the railroad.
Thank you for that. What my basic concern here is, when looked at the structure over the weekend again, luckily we've had a non-soon rather than monsoon season. But in the 5, 6, 7 months that it has taken to negotiate the development agreement, and I understand that key personnel left the city and that sort of thing, which slowed the process down. But what I saw in January and February has significantly deteriorated to last weekend. And so anything that can be in this process speed up getting us to demolition and stabilization of the historic structure without months of delay, and false readings, things like that have to be further negotiated. And I'd hate to see that happen.
Oh, agreed. Yeah, and I think that taking that step and then revising the boring for phase 2 will definitely help to avoid, I think, some of those kind of hiccups or whatever that for lack of a better word that you're describing. So yeah, that's the city's historic preservation offices in this the city in general. I mean, that's their position too. I mean, we want to try to move forward when we can, as soon as possible. And I think that the developer is interested in doing that as well, from the conversations I've had with them.
One additional question is, I understand the development agreement. The developer will not be acquiring all of the city's property. The north portion, north of the flood control dike, which also includes the City of Phoenix's water line easement, will not be sold to the developer.
I can't answer. I'm not sure about that. Yeah, really my knowledge is mostly just isolated, focused on the house itself. Yeah, for the most part, as it pertains to the agreement.
I think that's very important to have that knowledge, especially as the zoning case on this moves forward.
No, I'm just saying at this time, I don't. But yes, we'll certainly look into that. And I think it's a valid point. Yeah.
It will have a significant difference on intensity of development on this site, because if they don't have that extra land for increased density, it's going to be a lower intensity development than what the neighbors are fearing. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yep.
Also, the portion of the site south of First Street, I would assume that the developer will be acquiring that because they obviously own property to the south. And the city's ownership will be only associated with the flood dike north. Okay. Again, my whole concern here is that we came into this late to begin with. We had a November meeting, and then all of a sudden in January, it was a done deal. And then this done deal is set for another 7 months beyond that to get us to this point, all of the time that building is exposed to the elements. And what I saw, that exposure is not helping it.
Oh, no, no, of course, yeah. Yeah, and, you know, in terms of kind of keeping you updated on information, I mean, that's definitely my, you know, my goal moving forward. I've talked with the developers as well, and, you know, and they're, you know, I think, you know, they're interested in bringing, you know, additional information when they have it to share with the commission, whether it's them personally or providing me with information to provide to you and the commission. But yeah, yeah, we certainly want to, understanding that history, so to speak, we want to make sure that we're, yeah, keeping you informed as best we can. But yeah, sometimes things do move rapidly in this process, and I know that can cause frustration. So I get that. I
And
definitely
again,
get that.
I talked to you earlier before the meeting, but restate it now that if during the process of moving this to stabilization, you feel it necessary to come to this commission, rather than making the decision on that process yourself. First off, I hope you would. But second off, if you need to come to this commission, we meet monthly, but I'm sure there's not a member in this commission that wouldn't welcome a special meeting
Yeah.
to be held to make the process move along quickly so the building becomes protected.
Sure, and that's a good point. And as I was telling you earlier, I don't see that as an issue because there is no, you know, it's not a locally designated home. It's not on the Tempe Historic Property Register, so there's not a requirement to you know, bring a proposal to the commission. I don't even know that it would be necessary if it were on the register, but regardless, yes, yeah, I can make that decision, you know, in regard to the, you know, the rehabilitation, you know, pulling the trigger and saying, you know, we're doing it. Yeah, there's no need for delay on that end to have to wait for, you know, bureaucracy. So I don't foresee having to call a special meeting, but yeah, certainly, yeah, if that were necessary for some reason, I wouldn't hesitate to do that.
One final question, and this is more of a request.
Uh-huh.
Now that the development agreement has been approved and executed, in your next update to us, next meeting possibly,
Yep.
Could you do an outline of the development disposition agreement, at least the deal points, so that we know what the developer has agreed to with the city, especially anything related to the preservation of this building?
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly provide you information on historic preservation related items. I think that would be most appropriate to kind of focus on that, you know, knowing the purview of the commission. So yeah, I can certainly have a conversation with you about that.
Good,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you for the questions and comments, Vice Chair. Any other questions or comments? My only other question is maybe could you maybe just give us a generalized idea about what the schedule's looking like moving forward here? So the development agreement has now been, it's executed. So
Yes.
what's the general timeline here? Just basics.
Well, it just from historic preservation, I actually asked the developer that very question this morning, and they couldn't really give me an answer, and I think for good reason. I mean, some of it's just going to kind of depend on you know, mobilizing for this selective demolition, and then the, you know, getting this rehabilitation plan together. But they're going to have to pull together, obviously, a contractor, you know, to do that demolition work, and then perhaps maybe, I don't know, it's not clear, you know, maybe a different contractor to actually work on the rehabilitation. So it kind of just depends on how quickly they can bring somebody on board. But I mean, they did tell me that, you know, certainly, I think the term they used was kind of the fourth quarter. They hope to have, you know, not only the unzipping, the partial demolition done, but then also the rehabilitation plan put together along with a contractor brought on board. So fourth quarter of this year.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that's
just
actually
the
sooner than
estimate
I
on their part.
expected, but that's, Vice Chair.
Zach, if this moves forward in the fourth quarter, will that involve city money or developers' money?
It hasn't been decided yet. We're not sure at this
Where are
point.
we at with the grants? Are time's ticking? We lost 7 months. Are you up against a deadline at all?
I've been in touch with SHPO. I've submitted a progress report. I've let them know kind of the situation, that why we've had some delays just based on this pending development agreement, and the fact that there is redevelopment of the site happening. I think that the next big kind of benchmark is just we need to make sure, and this wouldn't be an issue. I think within 18 months of the execution of the grant, so that would be like January of this year, 18 months from then, you actually have to be starting the construction phase of the work. So, we're fine on that. There is a deadline to complete the work by 2025. And I mentioned, I mentioned to the SHPO grants coordinator, let's say, we had a problem or whatever, and we couldn't meet that deadline. Is it possible it could be extended in order for us to use the grant? And they said yes, there's a possibility. There's a mechanism so that it can be extended. So, which isn't always the case for certain grants, but in this case it is. So I think we're in good shape on that, and I'm keeping SHPO informed. So.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that answered my question, and I think unless there's
Chair
any...
Woodson?
Yes.
Commissioner,
Commissioner.
Question here. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lechner, for the report. Could you share a little bit more on the plan for the selective demolition? It'd be helpful to know, that they're confirming what they are demolishing does not have an integral structure to the historic elements, so that there isn't damage or potential historical elements falling or being further important. And then it'd also be helpful to know how we verified those historic elements. I noticed in the report that we have GIS aerials and other information dating back to 1930, but we're certain that the 1880 and is the initial date of the structure, and 1918 was an addition. So yeah, helpful, the materials that you have to verify what the historic parts are and how we're going to selectively demolish.
Yeah, so it's a lot of it, our understanding of that is based on the building condition assessment report that Bob Graham completed back in 2017. And this slide that I'm showing now is from that building condition assessment report. So anything that's labeled a room with a number next to it, that's part of the historic structure. Rooms 1 and 2 are part of the original Adobe home. Room 3, which we used to think was a 1918 addition, now we're not sure, but we know it is an addition and it's made out of Adobe. That is historic. It's a historic addition. And then room 4, which is composed of railroad ties, that's a kind of a World War I era addition. Now, anything that to the north of that, which is a good portion of the structure, is non-historic, and that would be coming off. And so you're talking about concerns about perhaps inadvertently removing historic portions. That's why Bob Graham would be there to consult, to be on site with the construction team, to first of all have a pre-construction meeting. I'm sure I would be participating in that as well. And then they're on site to ensure that the work that they're doing is only impacting the non-historic portions.
Thank you for verifying. And then a quick follow-up to that, Commissioner Woodson. I noticed that much of the structure appears to be exposed and certain sections daylighted.
Yes.
Is there a plan in place right now for sealing the building to the elements and trying to prevent further damage, especially the historic elements?
Yeah, I think Mr. Graham had had mentioned specifically in regard to the Adobe, you know, like putting some perhaps just even something as simple as tarps, because you know, as he said, like you do, like with Adobe, like it does, it's a breathable, you know, it's a natural material, and so you don't, you know, want to try to like seal it up or something. But yeah, I think that, yeah, just there is going to be some, particularly to any exposed portions now, and certainly the portion that's going to be exposed, you know, once you take off roughly, you know, half the house, yeah, there will be consideration to making sure that, you know, the elements and people, you know, aren't getting into the house as well. So, yeah, that's definitely on his mind and in our minds.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lechner. That's all I have, Commissioner Woodson.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, any further questions or comments? All right, well, hearing none, we thank you for the update and glad to hear that this is moving forward. And based on what you're explaining, it sounds like this should be satisfactory to, I think, the commission's concerns. And you'll be updating us as required.
More to come, absolutely. Yep.
All right, thank you. Okay, moving on. Agenda item 6, request for recommendation of adoption of the General Historic Properties Treatment Plan for the City of Tempe. This is a revisit to this with the final document version. So
Correct.
do you want to?
So, right, so I'll just brief, I appreciate that, Chair. So previously, the commission just had the opportunity to just review a draft of the document. So tonight, what the city is asking of the commission is to vote on a request for a recommendation of adoption of the General Historic Properties Treatment Plan for the City of Tempe, Maricopa County, Arizona. So since the commission had a chance to review the document, I believe it was back in April, perhaps. We've had additional consultation with the tribes and other consulting parties, whether it's municipal, state, federal agencies, also local organizations like the Tempe Historic Preservation Foundation received this document. Logan Simpson, the city's contractor on this project, incorporated various revision requests. None of them were, I would say, changed the document fundamentally, but were nevertheless, you know, very useful and very welcome and improved the document. So since then, I've sent out kind of what we consider kind of the final version. Not to say that there couldn't be a touch up or two to all those tribes and consulting parties. And I also made a presentation on this document to the July 4 Southern Tribes Cultural Resource Working Group meeting. So, you know, got some positive feedback there. And Andrew Gregory from Logan Simpson, who presented previously on this item before the commission, and assisted me with that presentation to the 4 Southern Tribes, is on the line with us this evening if you have kind of further specific questions about the plan. But yeah, we're requesting recommendation of adoption. The next step for this document would actually be City Council. So forwarding it to City Council for approval, and not just approval, but adoption, to actually adopt the document for use. And happy to answer questions, and Ms. Gregory, like I said, is online as well if you have questions for her.
Thank you for the explanation. Very good. Yeah, sounds like we're very close here. So I'll open it up to any other questions or comments by commissioners. Yes, proceed, Commissioner.
As a point of curiosity, Dr. Lechner, could you share a little bit of the meaningful feedback? I don't believe I could find it in the document or a summary. It does appear that there was consultation had with the 4 Southern Tribes, and would just love to hear more about that.
Ms. Gregory, would you mind kind of talking about maybe from your perspective, kind of what you feel like, or maybe some of the most salient points that were raised during that process of requesting revisions?
Sure. Good evening. Thanks for having me again. A lot of the comments were grammatical. We had a couple of comments from ASM clarifying the procedure.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Gregory, we can kind of barely just hear you. I'm not sure if you're able to increase the volume of your microphone or speak up a little bit.
Let's see here. Sorry. It's going. No?
Yep, that sounds better. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Comments we received, were grammatical. We did receive a couple of comments from Arizona State Museum clarifying the process for an inadvertent discovery when a burial discovery agreement was not in place for a project. So we did correct the procedures regarding those situations. We had some comments from Greg Glasgow with Yavapai Prescott Indian Tribe, clarifying kind of the considerations for identifying and I'll say resolving adverse effects for traditional cultural properties. So we wanted to keep that very general because the procedures for resolving adverse effect, really vary depending on what the traditional cultural property is and what the effect is. So we tried to address that based on Mr. Glasgow's comments, but again, keeping it general enough that it could apply or provide general direction for resolution of adverse effects to a range of property types.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Lechner. So I have Commissioner Woodson.
Okay, and thank you, Ms. Gregory, for joining us and providing some more input. Any further questions?
I just have one question, Andrea. I know your written consultations may not have had that many comments, but I believe you did have discussions with the tribes, before you wrote the plan. Is that correct?
Yeah, thanks, Lori, and that's a good point to bring up. So prior to the formal consultation, we did submit the draft plan to Gila River Indian Community and Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Community to review the documents to make sure, cultural histories, especially characterizations of prehistoric and some historical components of that cultural history were correct. And they provided feedback not only on the content of that section, but also on inclusion of research themes and questions related to continuity. So that feedback was solicited and received prior to formal consultation with the larger consulting partners.
Thank you. I have one follow-up question, and it's really for my own curiosity since we're working on our plan for the city of Phoenix. You used the word proto-historic, and was there any discussion about that term? We've had a lot of discussion.
Yeah, Lorraine. So there was a little bit of discussion about that. I don't think that there's a great term that everyone likes. And I'll say, and I mean mostly, the tribal communities really like. There was some weigh-in on the term of post-classic, and we received feedback from Gila River that proto-historic was preferred over post-classic. So it was kind of like post-classic is the best option at this point, was kind of the consensus, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Good plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further questions or comments? Very well, and I have no questions or comment, well, other than to add a comment that I'm pleased with how this has come to final fruition, and I think it's a very good document for the city, and by all accounts, sounds like the commission is in full support. So at this point, I will ask for a motion, and there's a motion written in your materials, if you can just read it straight from there.
Commissioner Montero, I make a motion to adopt the General Historic Properties Treatment Plan for Tempe, written by Logan Simpson and Tempe, City of Tempe.
Oh, just a point of order, I'm sorry. Just may need to revise that to, just as a request, or as a motion to, I'm sorry, I'm blanking here for a second. A motion to approve a recommendation of adoption of the plan.
Okay. Want me to say it again? Motion to approve a recommendation for adoption of the General Historic Properties Treatment Plan 2023.
Second.
Very good. Thank you very much. We have a motion on the floor, so we'll take a vote. All who so approve, just say aye.
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 Aye here. Any opposed? And I believe that's all ayes. So thank you very much. Motion passes. And thank you, Ms. Gregory, for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, that's great. Another great planning document going to council for final approval. Excellent. All right. Okay, then let's, I guess, move on. Agenda item 7, chair and staff updates. I do not have any updates, so pass
Okay.
it on to staff.
I just have one, which is unusual, but probably welcome. And then Mr. Adhikari has one on the general plan. I just wanted to mention, so last time we talked a little bit about the demolition permit request for 599 West 5th Street, the Bauer House. And at that time, I had told you that I had kind of reached out to the applicant who's working on behalf of the developer to see if they would allow me to kind of come in and take photos of the interior of the property, and they have given me permission, kind of initial permission to do that. There's a tenant in the property right now, so it's going to be a few weeks away, but they're going to get back to me in terms of the date, which I can at least kind of go in and provide some photographic documentation. So that I was pleased, at least to be able to do that. So I just want to let the commission know that will be happening. But that's all on that point.
That's good to hear. I mean, it's still regrettable that the building's going to be demolished, of course, but get a little more documentation on it is always preferable. Thank you. Okay, and yes,
Yeah, Chair.
please proceed.
Yeah, Chair Woodson and Commission members, thank you so much. As you know, I've been giving you updates on the general plan every month, and last month I gave you an update that it was going to the Development Review Commission. It did go to the DRC on July 25th, and it was approved by them 7-0 unanimously. So now the document, as it should be hopefully adopted, is with the council, and it's also a public document. You can go to the website and look at the document. And the council hearing, the first hearing is actually tomorrow, right here on the 10th. And the second hearing will be on the 24th. And as I have been mentioning that there are quite a few HP-related items that are of interest to you that we have included in consultation with the stakeholders like the Tempe Historic Preservation Foundation and other people who have given us input. So there is a whole element on historic preservation, and there is also a mention of the downtown historic core, a vision for a plan. If this gets adopted, there will be a plan that the city will begin to create, delineating the boundary and making the more details of how that particular plan should look in terms of the design guidelines and compatibility and all of that thing about. So I do encourage any one of you who is interested to come to the meetings tomorrow and also on the 24th. And if you like the plan, speak in support or whatever comment that you want to make, the plan is online. It's a long document, but you can always search for the historic preservation. You'll find many, many words. But there are a couple elements that you might like to take a quick look on the land use and the historic preservation element and also a little bit in the appendices. If you have any questions, I'll be very happy to respond to them.
Thank you very much. That's great to hear also. Another big step forward. And yeah, when you described that last week, I know myself, and I'm sure the commissioner is very pleased to hear about those elements that were included, especially about the downtown cores, a nice addition kind of towards the 11th hour there, it sounded like. So very good. Excellent. Any further updates?
No further.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, item 8, current events and announcements, member announcements. Do any commissioners have any announcements? No? Okay. And
Chair,
yes,
the letter that we talked about last week, did that end up going to Mayor?
I can answer that question. Yeah, yes, it did. Yes, it did. I sent it to the mayor and council aide, and she confirmed with me that it was disseminated to both mayor and the council members.
Great, thanks.
I didn't hear anything beyond that, but I wouldn't expect to necessarily.
All right, thank you.
It's not announcement, but I have a comment for future agenda I would like to hear about. Zach, you mentioned the last month about this 2024 bond for historic preservation. I would like to know a little bit more about what's the plan, what's included, what's this about, because I don't know too much, but sounds like a great idea to, I don't know. We have historic preservation plan, but it really need a funding, and it would be great to have funding mechanism in place.
Yeah, I think my understanding is that it's something that the mayor has, is maybe talked about a little bit. I haven't received any, kind of anything official on that as of yet. So it might be a little premature to talk about it at a public meeting. However, I'll look into it a little bit more. Yeah, thank you.
good question. Thank you. Okay. Any further member announcements? No. Any staff announcements?
Yeah, I'll just briefly, we will be having a meeting next month. So there's already a few agenda items that have kind of made their way on, and that's even before Chair Whitson and I have had a chance to talk about other items. But one of them was kind of in the making, a presentation on the Tempe Downtown Refresh Initiative. That'll be happening. We'll have a city manager a director to help us not make sense of that, but to help us learn more about that. There's also another presentation, and I'll confirm that this will be happening, on the City of Tempe's Making Space and Equity Study for Parks and Recreation. So that was requested by some city staffers to have the opportunity to talk to HPC about that, and because of the fact that certain parks have historic overlap, I think that's a good idea. And then finally, I've been working with primarily with Ryan LeVake to put together some proposed historic preservation related text amendments to city code, chapter 14A, the Historic Preservation Ordinance. And so this will be an opportunity just to discuss with you and then receive input on some of those proposed code text amendments. Get your thoughts, if you potentially would like to see others, or if you have questions about these ones that I'll be proposing to you. Some of them, in fact, I would say probably most of them kind of come out of priorities listed in the Historic Preservation Plan. So things like, well, I'll go into detail later about it, but anything kind of in the HP plan that relates to changing the code or requesting to change the code, that will be in the draft document that I provide to you. But this is not requesting your approval or recommendation of approval at this time. We're just still in the stage of just kind of getting your input so that we can incorporate any feedback that you might have. So, and that's all.
All right. right, very well. And what's the date of the next meeting?
Oh, September 13th. Thank you to
13.
Jennifer Daniels.
Okay. All right, very well. Well, any further announcements from staff? No? Very well, then I guess we will move to adjourn the meeting at 7:20 PM. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening and stay cool.